Hi, I'm Stephen Button. I wanted to give you a few tips on how to heal your life. So what's this thing I always talk about in terms of healing? Like, why are we always obsessed with healing? An example is, you're not where you want to be because of some stuff you're holding in the past. You've mistakenly equated the future with the past. So healing for me, whenever people do experience a deep healing, it's something like awakening. I link enlightenment, healing, and awakening to all be the similar and the same process of unfolding, coming closer and closer to life. So as I often say, can you meet the lover or a flower with your whole body? Because if you can't, part of you is leaning into the past. Part of you is not fully present. So the purpose of life for me is to live life fully. It's kind of a circular definition. What is live life fully? Experience life as much as possible. And we have this beautiful instrument for living life. And when your instrument, this looks like this, is partially blocked, you're going to have problems. Now, where are we partially blocked? Here, here, here. These are the three centers. Now, here's the problem with your life, my life, people's lives. When we're supposed to access this center, we access this center. We make decisions that feel good rather than decisions that are logical. Likewise, when we're supposed to be here, making a love decision, we do one that makes sense up here. Or this area here is sexual and instinct. Now, Georgios Ivanovich Gurdjieff, he broke all these down into fairly subtle distinctions, and so did Morieva in his follow-up Gnosis books, 3 volumes on the subtleties of and how Orthodox Eastern Christianity is the same as the deeper work that Gurdjieff taught. So, a lot of us are living in instinct. Why? Because when a moment is incomplete for you in your life, you keep reliving it until it finds completion. I don't know why that works. I just know it works. If you were in an abusive relationship and you were always overshadowed by this towering figure, you'll create that again and again in your relationship, or with your boss, or in any situation. Why? Because universe, as Buckminster Fuller called it, is eternally gracious. It's giving you many opportunities to heal this thing. Why? Again, the circle. The purpose of life is to live life fully. The purpose of life is to experience as deeply as possible the full spectrum of experience. So, as you know, these are the chakras, right? There's 7 of them. And if one of them is somewhat blocked, this one will take up more of the burden of living. That's not a 2, it's just a swirl of swirling energy. Now, a lot of us are somewhat blocked down here. You know what are somewhat blocked down here? In the lower, the root, the grounding, etc. You know, as Peter Levine says, what trauma does is it brings energy upward. You ever notice mind chatter and spinning in your head? My relationship with trauma is that I didn't know I had it, and that's the same as most people's relationship with it, until I broke my neck. Then I was like, oh, I was around 30. That's a clear trauma. Now I know I have trauma. Now I can go into healing. When I went into healing this physical trauma, I realized I had all these other subtle spiritual and emotional traumas that had wound back through my life. And the beautiful thing about it was, now I say from fracture to rapture. That's the path that I guide people on. For me, it was a literal fracture, and there's all kinds of beautiful and poetic ways of looking at this. Sometimes it's a fracture of the heart, a broken heart. That's one of the most common things that initiate healing. Broken, braid into powder, reduced to ash, however you want to say it in the poetic tradition. So, how do you move from fracture to rapture? Well, you realize that the fracture did not start here with my neck. The fracture, let's say, started here at my birth and here at my past life. right? Now, you don't have to believe in this stuff. This is like a link in a chain. Although past life doctrine is a very ancient teaching. It was even in early Christianity. It was taken out by early church fathers because it didn't really resonate with the thing they wanted to build in. However, it was like common knowledge at one point. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong necessarily. I'm just pointing out that whatever your system is, and this is birth, okay? Birth is also riddled with trauma. Birth is, in my mind, human bodies can achieve and accomplish and move through many, many things that they're not entrusted to move through. So we're indoctrinated with all this fear around birth and all these terrible things that could happen. And lo and behold, many of them happen. Why? Because they're built into expectation. It's nice to have a medical facility around in case you have some sort of cataclysm or disease or something that you need support with, blood loss, etc. However, as Alan Watts famously and patriarchally stated, like, Native American women had a different relationship to birth, so they'd be out working in the field, pop a baby out, go bring it to the tent, work again soon after, you know. Is that real? Maybe, because there are cultures like that. You know, my daughter, I was forced into a lot of this because my daughter was born breech upside down. In the medical system, now we're talking about birth trauma here, so bear with me because it's relevant. This is where most of your trauma started. Like calipers, surgeries, C-sections. You know, a C-section, as a trauma mentor of mine once said, it will create a situation in your life where you can't get through things yourself. Because the portal to being born is like you physically will and move through things. And I've like rehearsed this with clients and I've relived this myself. You can be reborn to this world. That's part of what this work is about. And that's why the beauty of starting with this thing called birth. Now it could be like, as an example, you were stabbed in your past life. You come into the womb and then these calipers come and get you. Right? You're already reiterating traumas potentially. Stanislav Grof did a lot of good, beautiful work around trauma, birth trauma archetypes, things that exist in that nature. So, I was saying the C-section trauma, people who don't move through their birth process, for one thing, they don't get inoculated with the vaginal flora. For another thing, they don't get the first chiropractic adjustment, that people have noted. They don't get the emotional, like, gradual movement. They don't get the first cranial sacral adjustment. They don't get the first feeling of accomplishment of having moved through their own first tribulation. So she would tell me that people who were born by C-section needed to be kind of lifted out of a situation. They would just sort of sit there frozen. You know, they'd reach states. Is that familiar to you? Someone else? So what we do is we pendulate. We swing in and out of that trauma. Anyway, the birth trauma, you know, also, like when I relived my birth trauma, I had kind of come slamming into the pelvis, or the water broke and my head got slammed. When I fractured my neck, my head got slammed on the ocean floor. Water breaking, head slam, same neck trajectory. I can still feel that sometimes. It's okay. It's part of the beauty of, like, when I'm speaking and ranting and rambling about what I do, I get this new inspiration from this tension in my spine, this sort of torsion. Because I've broken my tailbone earlier, I've broken my neck through a head impact, and it's like it creates all this energetic in the spine. This keeps me rooted in the earth, because otherwise I would just sit and meditate and float away all the time. I used to do that. The first time I meditated in high school, I laid on the floor, and I just couldn't come out of it. I was there like, it felt like hours. I was just laying in the living room floor on the rug, and I just couldn't come out of it. It was like a dream. I've been chosen not to do that anymore. I'm in my body. If I delay that now, I feel this burn. It's like I go as far into the dream as I can with this burn. Do you see how I told an empowering version of that story? Like, I'm grateful the ocean broke my neck because it taught me all these things about life. It awakened me to all these other things about life. Now, you need to fill in your story gaps here, okay? That's your purpose here. And your story gaps, they all live in your body somewhere. Like, someone had their shoulder touched at a funeral. That looks like an ice cream cone. Good, it's a jovial memory. No, it's not. They had their shoulder touched at a funeral. The grief of their father was always in that shoulder. When I touched it, they remembered that. Boom. You know? So, you almost look like this. It's like Do you know in hypnotherapy when they regress, nothing is suppressed, and yet when you're in your conscious state, a lot of it's suppressed because you can't necessarily function with every memory ever walking around with you. That's where you need to get closer to this state, rapture, because you need a lot of physical flow to contain all those memories, and also there's no containment of all those memories because once you open that flow, they flow through, and what you're present to is the present moment continually flowing. Like Kierkegaard said, life is lived forward, but it must be understood backwards. That's a big but, okay? By the way, the word but is a signal that one of your stories is arising, and that's his story, and I just want you to think about how profound that is, though. This is what we're doing here. Thank you, Kierkegaard. Where I'm looking to understand my story so that I can go forward. And by the way, rapture isn't like heaven. This isn't the religious sense, the rapture. I think that word was usurped. I use it in a different way. It's like a state of the most blissful version of life. And it's not contingent upon external circumstances. So I use it in relational rapture, and I also use it like sensual rapture. I get rapturous states sometimes looking at the light glinting off an oak leaf. So that's something I've been trained in my body, okay? And I just want you, let's see. Where do you live on this timeline? Look at this little dot. I never knew that was there. Where do you live on this timeline? From fracture to rapture. Oops, I have that backwards. You know what's interesting too is most people say, what is rapture? And then I had this one like osteopath, and he came and said, what is fracture? Right? So everyone's focused on one thing or the other. I would say most people are like in this equation here, like in here somewhere, so close to their wound. Like if I look at the oak leaf and I see the shining light and I enter the state of rapture, my wound does not exist. My wound made it possible to experience that. Most people live here with their language, body, actions, thoughts. And whenever they try to get over here, oh, I had a great day, but my foot still hurts or whatever. See, remember this but word? So, what loops are keeping you in this comfort range? The stories you're telling. I told myself stories that propelled me over here. I'm grateful the ocean broke my neck because it taught me like to live in divine flow. I'm getting closer, getting closer. So this is not a state that's perpetually in the future. As Walt Whitman said, there's never more heaven and hell than there is right now. One of my favorite affirmations is, this is the greatest moment of my life. Am I lying? Answer. No, I can't be lying. Because how am I determining greatness and equality? It's a ranking system in my mind. If I convince myself it's the greatest moment of my life, then it is. Here's a question. What if I'm in a war-torn country and there's bombs falling all around? Is this the greatest moment of my life? It reminds me of It's All Quiet on the Western Front. Remember when at the end he's in the trenches, he like picks out his journal, he goes up to draw this bird and he gets shot. He was just embracing that moment. He saw that thing, he came into the inspiration, he was shot. Do the angels care that, like, do they say, that was a bad choice, man, you should have kept on living? No, because there's no judgment or linear time in that other state. He accepted the invitation into rapture. There you go. He was shot as a consequence. What will happen to you? Something. Usually in my mind it's positive, though. I'm not trying to say, like, you're going to get shot if you invite the rapture, if you usher in the rapture. Now, I had, like, birth trauma, like skateboard injury, rock hit my head, like, a wasp stung my ear. Right? There's all kinds of little traumas. These other ones become the big traumas, and then there's these other things. Awakening 1 and 2. These are going this way too. Like, what's one of your primary awakening experiences? One of mine was my fracture. Another one was a beach walk. This is a weird, on the side it does not work. Sorry, you can't read that. I was walking on the beach with my father. I was spontaneously awakened. I needed that to experience this in the correct way. That's what I realized. I had that, and I didn't honor it fully, so I got this. So you will get whispers, and you ignore those whispers, and they become crashing, crushing blows, screams, something you can't ignore. Are you getting that now? What can you not ignore? Like, look at see how my hair has thinned? I used to be very attached to my sort of lush hair. Ego. And also, similarly, I'm always explaining the healing journey, and people say, like, heal your hair. It's like a lot of people are wearing glasses, and I always think, like, heal your eyes. It's just, there's some kind of judgment we carry, and it's ludicrous, and it doesn't mean I'm not here to express the beauty of healing and even to facilitate the greatest healing. Some of the greatest healers had their own issues. Like, Mother Teresa was often riddled with disease, and she also overcame a lot of, like, plagues and diseases because of her faith. It doesn't matter. You're looking at the package because we're entrained to do that. Forget that for the moment. Just like listen to this voice of this archetype. What is it? Chiron in the second house. I'm here to express the beauty of healing according to astrologers. How do you want to frame it? It doesn't really matter to me. Like, here we go. And look at this little. Sometimes I get like a rash on my third eye when I start like going into these states. I think it's like heavy metals purging out of there, but you know, whatever. So I'm going to turn this page. Is it working? It takes a second. This is getting a little messy. I'm going to do something else here. So there we go. If our purpose is to live life most fully, then there are, oops, there we go. Then we've come upon a duality. Okay, let's call it less life, more life. What are you doing that's making you feel and experience less? A lot of things. I was thinking the other day about people who go on vacation, a lifelong vacation they plan forever, and then they're drunk and like sick from overindulging or whatever the whole time. What? Like, why? Like, I don't understand that. I never did understand that. So maybe like drugs. Now this is a different kind of list. You could even read, right? Or like media. What do you do to sit there to get out of life? We could say, you know, evil. Evil's the opposite of live, right? So you could say these are these, and these are these. Basic duality. Now, one of the funny things is that I often say when I experienced awakening, I knew that this wouldn't die. And whenever I say I experienced the space beyond duality, people get so upset about that because they're very attached to their dualities. So I'm indulging that piece of you with this duality now. Now, the irony is that what could be here? A drug, right? Like Iboda or like ayahuasca. Alcohol, like maybe. What if you drank wine like Rumi to write the greatest poetry ever? You know, there may be a state where you use wine or tobacco. Look at that. What's happening here? I'm kind of collapsing thought domains, as Werner Erhard would call them, or dualities. Why? Tobacco, I've studied a lot of the history of this plant. It's fascinating to me because it's the plant that fueled the modern way of thought more than any other plant. And it's also a thing that killed a lot of people, though some of the studies have been like falsified. So it's okay to believe both of those things. People are so black and white, man. Like, I applied to some government job quite a few years ago, and it was like, you can't have smoked within 3 years. What? A cigar? A pipe? I mean, are you serious? Pipe smoking is correlated with a longer lifespan than non-smoking. And there's a few factors in that. I'm just saying, like, it facilitates independent thought when used wisely. Native Americans often smoked. They didn't have cancer. So even Japanese smoke 10 times more than Americans, and they have way, way, way less cancer because there's a lot of factors. And obviously tobacco like Marlboro has been like manipulated and such. Even that, I think Japanese smoke a lot of Marlboros. So somehow it's like the placebo in the study. The body overcomes almost anything through conscious thought. So the reason I'm saying this is because it's not the thing you do. Look at this, media. Uh-oh. we're in trouble. Because this is almost the same lesson, reading, okay? Reading, learning, growing, media, video, whatever. Because you can learn another language through media. You can study it. You can study another culture. If you're studying another culture to perhaps go there or to enrich your life, versus just staring at pictures of Venice because you know you'll never go there and you're trying to numb yourself out because you don't want to be in whatever, Ahwatukee or Lodi. Those are places, by the way. In California and Arizona. So this is the list you need to create for yourself. Because if you're spending more time here, your trauma is under the surface, is just laying there, dormant. And so this is what we call fracture. And this is the rapture. If you're spending time here, it's opening you to more and more states of this. Like, seriously, bath. I've used baths to meditate on the stars and bath to numb myself out so I could, like, forget the day. And now there's, like, ice baths, right? Like, people like cold water therapy because I think it gets you awake. You can't, like, hide from life. You go jump in a frozen lake. Now, maybe you jump in a frozen lake every day for a year and it starts to become like some numbing capacity. Oh, I get to go do my comfort thing of jumping in a lake. So you need to find out for you what's most real, what's most pertinent. Now, this yin and yang symbol is interesting because notice that these all exist on either scale. So the thing that's most important for me here is this whole circle. This is life, life, life. It's not whether you're here or here, not even as an individual. Like, people get so caught up in gender. And when every person's a spectrum between, like, masculine and feminine. Where are you on the scale? And not only that, it's like the Enneagram, which I could draw, but it'll take a minute of cognitive function. Where are you on the scale when you're playing volleyball, when you're making love, when you're at the grocery store, right? You're just this vast spectrum of sweeping energy. You can't step into the same river twice. Forget about it. And then you come up with someone else to have a relationship and they're like this. And they have all their trauma, their past life traumas. Boom, 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 boom. What the hell is this? It's called chaos. And that's okay. Because that's your life, and that's love, and that's the flow, and that's the state. And then you get glimpses of, like, your fracture comes up in relationship. Let me write this relationship here. And your rapture comes up in relationship, doesn't it? They should both come up, but that's a successful relationship in my mind. I just saw something that said, if your partner isn't a 10 out of 10, get out of there now. It's time to leave. Okay. Like, I don't need to comment on how ludicrous that is. You can't always run from your life. Like, your relationship is a projection of you. It's not this other person. You're having a relationship with your own mind, and this other person walks in sometimes and says, hey there, and you're like, oh, hey. Like, I sort of noticed you there now. I couldn't before because I was too much in my own head. So what are you doing to live more fully and to live less fully? Now, there are 3 body centers, as I said. We usually live, like, with one. Let me see if I can. Like, let's say you have, let's do both ways. This is the front of you. This is you in profile, right? This is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a heart, by the way. At least that's the instinct. I spread those out too far. It's okay. So this is you in profile, right? Do you lead with your emotions? Sink your head back. You're going. That's going to create certain consequences in spectrum in life. You go leading with your sexual center. You're going to attract certain sexual dynamics, and then the heart sinks back in this case. Why? Because it's protecting itself from being wounded. And the head's usually jutting out too a little bit. You'll see a lot of people do that. Look at Larry David and like Curb Your Enthusiasm. I love old Larry. However, psychologically he's got his own constellation of issues. And so when you're leading with your sexual center, you're going into the fire. You're going to get battered and destroyed because all these influences, astral and otherwise, that you affect, you're draining your life force, your energy goes out the window. You're doing this willy-nilly without thinking there'll be consequences. Your heart has to sink out of the way and your head has to come forward to rationalize these things. So how these 3 centers operate together determines your personality. Now, it's in contradistinction to your essence. Your essence is this soul force. When I experienced an awakening, it was like, that was my essence, the essence. I won't even say it's mine because I don't know what mine even means. However, it would not die. It's this thing that, like, when this body maybe is done, then the essence kind of flows through the body. It's also not contingent on these. There are no imbalances necessarily in this essence thing, in my opinion. It just is, and it's this experience of I am. I am can sometimes get you in touch with it. You'll feel a resonance in your solar plexus sometimes. You just need to see what you notice. So, a lot of times I say personality versus essence. You want to live more and more out of your essence. Personality is like you communicate on one level and all your traumas are available. There are also various levels of communication. Let's say for this sake there are 3. There's transactional. You just say the thing you need to say. It's like, here you go, here's your money, thank you. I'll take my money back. Then there's emotional, and then there's transcendental, let's say. And maybe these need to be reversed, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, here you just say the thing. Here you say the thing with some emotion. And here you say the thing with some emotion and some context. So it helps you relate to someone without all your traumas being in the fore. You know, most people, it's personality to personality, that's it. That's all they'll ever know. Sometimes their essence comes through, maybe it gets shut down. So you want to awaken your essence. So when you walk in a room, your essence is there. I often work with clients and I'm like, you could call this the soul, or it's just when you feel fully alive and you're not all riddled with ache and trauma and all this BS. You want to entrain that to surface more and more so that you can be more and more alive and you can have more and more fulfilling relationships. That's the beauty of it. So, yeah. I hope that helps. The main point is just to find healing, because that's your awakening, and that will determine the quality of your life and your relationships and what you're doing and your divine purpose. And I'm Stephen Budden. I support people through consulting and in-person work and through books. So I hope this helped. I'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.